Welcome to For I See Old Things Happening Again, Jill Freedman's Missing Generations, an event in honor of Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day, during which we remember the 6 million Jews who were killed in the Holocaust. It marks the anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto uprising. I'm Rachel Stern, Executive Director of the Fritz Ascher Society for Persecuted, Ostracized, and Banned Art based in New York. Today, I'm honored to introduce Susan Chevlowe, Chief Curator and Museum Director of Derfner Judaica Museum and the Art Collection at Hebrew Home at Riverdale in the Bronx, where she has organized solo shows featuring the work of Michaela Amato, Leonard Fried, Jill Freedman, Jonathan Hammer, Robert Katz, Richard McBee, Jill Nathanson, Archie Rand, and many others, as well as group exhibitions. She is a former adjunct assistant professor in the program in Jewish art and visual culture at the Jewish Theological Seminary, where she also served as co-chair of the Visual Arts Committee of the Arts Advisory Board. Prior to coming to the Derfner, Dr. Chevlowe was an associate curator at the Jewish Museum, New York. Dr. Chevlowe received her PhD in art history from the Graduate Center CUNY. She is a member of the Jewish Art Salon Advisory Board and lectures and writes about Jewish art and visual culture. We will first hear from Susan Chevlowe about the documentary and street photographer Jill Freedman, and then have a conversation with family member Wendy Wernick, followed by a Q&A. Welcome, Susan and Wendy, and the floor is yours now. Susan.
Rachel, thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you for inviting me to speak on this very solemn occasion. I'm going to be talking, as we said, about Jill Freedman, and Wendy will join in with us after that. And I'm really happy to see so many people here from around the country and even outside the US. So let me get started. I'm going to share my screen with my presentation to begin. And I'm assuming that everybody can see that. And Rachel and Wendy, you were just going to turn your video off, right? Okay. Jill Freedman was a photojournalist committed to social justice. When she took up the subject of commemoration of the Holocaust around the time of the 50th anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto uprising in 1993, she was obsessed with the fact that no one came to the aid of the Jews. No one helped them. For her, social justice work and the Holocaust photo book project she planned and that she would come to call Missing Generations were one and the same. In 2023, I organized an exhibition using the same title, Missing Generations, Photographs by Jill Freedman, which included 36 of Jill's black and white photographs documenting sites of destruction, as well as survivors' return visits and life after the Holocaust, principally in Hungary, Poland, and the Czech Republic. It was the first time they were exhibited. The images capture the milestone events that took place beginning with commemorations of the 50th anniversary of the Ghetto uprising, including the return of many survivors for observances in Warsaw and at Auschwitz beginning in 1993 and 1994. So before I turn to our main topic, I will share a brief overview of Jill's biography and her work. And here you see her in a photo taken in 1968. Jill Freedman was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania on October 19th, 1939 to Ross and Selma Freedman. Her dad was a traveling salesman and her mother was a nurse. She grew up in the Squirrel Hill neighborhood and majored in sociology at the University of Pittsburgh. When she graduated in 1961, she went to Israel and lived and worked on a kibbutz, then as a singer in Jerusalem before moving on to Paris and at Paris and London. She was said to be a wonderful singer. Maybe Wendy will talk more about that afterward. So she was able to make a living from her voice. She did many different things in life. She returned to the United States and settled in New York City in 1964, and she was working then as a copywriter and photo researcher. In 1966, she borrowed a friend's camera and was instantly smitten. She was self-taught and best known for her street and documentary photography, recalling the work of André Cortege, W. Eugene Smith, Dorothea Lange, and Henri Cartier-Bresson. Freedman's lifelong commitment to using her camera in the fight for social justice began early. Devastated by the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. on April 4th, 1968, that June, Freedman joined the Poor People's Campaign March to Washington, D.C., and documented the encampment called Resurrection City, set up by the demonstrators on the National Mall. And here you see one of the photographs of that encampment, Resurrection City. Some of those images appeared in Life magazine and were her very first to be published. She lived among the protesters, becoming part of their community, an approach she took throughout her career. And here are a few more from the mall. She also published a book of the images in 1970 entitled Old News, Resurrection City, and it was the first of 7 books she completed during her lifetime. In 1971, Freedman helped to found Soho Photo Gallery in a loft on Prince Street and West Broadway in New York City, along with other photographers, and she showed there in 1972 and 1974. So these photographs, this first one is Love Kills from 1972, and this is New Orleans from 1973. These are 2 of her iconic images from this period. In 1975, she traveled with the Clyde Beatty Cole Brothers Circus, and drawn to these outsider performers, she photographed different circuses throughout her career. 2 other projects produced her perhaps best known books. The first is Firehouse, and this is a 5-alarm fire, 1976. This book was the resulted from the images that she produced between 1975 and 1977 when she lived among firefighters in the South Bronx and Harlem, covering their work. There's another photo. Her next project was New York City police officers from 2 Manhattan precincts, which led to the publication of Street Cops in 1981. And here's the cover of that book. She published 3 more books during her lifetime. 2 were on Ireland, A Time That Was, Irish Moments, published in 1987, and Ireland Ever in 2004. And she also published a book called Jill's Dogs in 1993. So in addition to planning a book of her missing generation photographs, the Holocaust photographs, which was never published and has not yet been published, she was just planning on it and working on it for a long time. In addition to this book on the Holocaust, she also planned 2 additional photography books that were left unfinished at the time of her death. And these were to be titled Mad Hatton and Patriot Acts. This is a photograph of Jill Freedman in Europe in 1993 in a Jewish cemetery in Poland. So now I'm getting to our main focus of today's talk. So Freedman lived in the Village on Sullivan Street in New York City for many years after her arrival in New York. But after she was diagnosed with breast cancer in 1988 and her rent tripled in the early 1990s, she moved to Miami Beach, Florida, where she lived for more than a decade. She returned to New York around 2003 and lived on the Upper West Side until her death from complications of cancer on October 9th, 2019. So as I said, here she is photographed in a Jewish cemetery in Poland in 1993 when she started work on this project that she called Missing Generations. Soon after she took the photographs in Poland, the Czech Republic, and Hungary, she planned to make them into this photography book, Missing Generations, the Holocaust 50 years later, and she created a mock-up of the book that included 80 black and white photographs. The cover that she designed, which I'm going to show you in a moment, has some disturbing imagery on it, so I wanted just to let people know that. I'm only going to show it for a moment. It shows 2 advertising posters with anti-Semitic graffiti, including a swastika and hate speech. So I'm going to show it for just a moment. because it's evidence of the anti-Semitism that Freedman witnessed around that time that she started working on the project, and that motivated the work that she was doing. So this is the cover image that she was planning for Missing Generations, the Holocaust, 50 years later. The slide on the left is showing a Volkswagen ad. This was a picture that she took in London. So not in the US, not in Miami, not in New York, not in Europe. Sorry, in Europe, in London, right? But not in Poland. And the image on the right is a defaced poster of a woman. You see that someone's drawn a swastika on her face, and it's also been crossed out maybe by somebody else. And we don't know where this photo, actually, we don't know where that photo was taken. So this is sort of the context in which she's creating this work. It's a reaction to anti-Semitism, and what she saw was happening again. This image shows the first 2 pages of the book mock-up, where she is telling her story and her relationship to the project and why she was doing this project, which I'll talk about in depth. So here it's especially text heavy. It discusses her motivations for the project. And what she understood was that the way she saw the world, the persecution of peoples, the suppression of individual rights and freedoms, racism, segregation, hatred of the other, and fascist policies. These were everything that led to the murder of Jews and other people during the Nazi era. And while we've seen that she was already concerned with issues of social justice, she took on this project, this looking back at the Holocaust, at the stories and memories and experiences of survivors, because she wanted to expose the particular history of the Holocaust in order to save people in the future and save people in that moment in her own time. Because she didn't want what happened to Jews during the Holocaust to happen to anyone, especially Jews, again. And so she asked herself these questions. How did no one help the victim? Would this happen again? How could she stop it? Because she had this incredible sense of responsibility, the sense of social justice and responsibility to other more vulnerable people. And she also realized while doing this project 30 years ago that the firsthand witnesses to these horrific events of the Holocaust would soon be gone. So it was really important to her to document their stories, to find these people, to listen to them, to share their stories. And because of the work she did, these stories have been preserved to be passed on as a testimony and warning. As Jill wrote, knowledge of the Holocaust, which she learned about as a child through graphic photographs in old Life magazines that she found in her parents' attic, shaped her future as a photographer. She, quote, stared at those pictures and grieved until her, quote, parents discovered it and burned the magazines. And she recalled another quote, I'm paraphrasing, but it was too late. Years later, when I picked up a camera, it was those pictures I saw in my dreams. Knowledge of the Holocaust has shaped my feelings, the way I see things. It remains a point of reference. So after returning from this first trip that she made to Poland in 1993, again, the anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto uprising, she decided that she wanted to go back again in 1994 to document ongoing commemorations that would continue up until the 50th anniversary of liberation of Auschwitz, and also would even continue to the anniversary of the end of the war. So she applied for and received a grant from the Alicia Patterson Foundation to fund the project. And as part of the fellowship requirements, she submitted and had published 4 photo essays in the foundation's journal that was called the APF Reporter, which I'll also be showing you images from. This is the typed application that she sent into the foundation to fund her trip. And so some of her writings in the book that she proposed had already kind of gelled, right, in the application. So she used some of the same wording in the text of the book mock-up. And so this type copy of the grant was something that I had come upon in the archives that the family has from Jill's estate. So she used much of the same text in her introduction in the book mock-up, and in the application, she explained in detail her motivation, what she planned to do, and the structure of the photo essays that she would produce. Sorry. This is a photo of, it was called Survivors in Front of the Warsaw Ghetto Memorial. It was taken in 1993. So in the application, she wrote about the first trip, and she wrote about the trip in 1993, on which she had actually taken this photo. She said, "This April was the 50th anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto uprising, and as soon as I realized it, I had to go. If I had to swim there, I was going. Maybe I could mourn the dead, honor them, let some of it go. I had to try. So I went to Warsaw, Treblinka, Majdanek, Auschwitz, Birkenau, not just as a camera, but as a real person with a real passion. I didn't fully know why I was there, but I photographed survivors, their children, old soldiers and witnesses, and pilgrims like me. I had to be there. And when I finally looked at my pictures, I saw that I had the beginning of something, for I see old things happening again." She was concerned that in her own lifetime, survivors were once again hearing the term ethnic cleansing in Europe. They were hearing conspiracy theories that Jews were plotting to take over the world. And she also wrote that she had heard and knew that 1/3 of Americans polled believed the Holocaust never happened. So this was a period of intense Holocaust denial in the early 1990s. So the mock-up begins with cemetery images, followed by photos from the commemorations at the Warsaw Ghetto. Again, the pictures of survivors. This is a page from the book mock-up showing the photo that we just saw adjacent to another photo. This is Jill seen in a reflection as she travels on a bus with survivors and other family members in 1993. And it's a very rich and haunting image. In it, the journey in the present, where abandoned cattle cars are visible in the near distance, is juxtaposed, even merged with the fatal journeys of the past, right? So it's a way that that absence can be made visualized in the present moment, and also felt, I think. I think there's a lot of feeling that comes through in the work. So separate from her own planned book, right, Missing Generations, which I've said, never published, Jill's photojournalistic essays appeared in 4 articles in 4 consecutive issues of volume 17 of the Alicia Patterson Foundation's publication called the APF Reporter, and you see the cover of one of them, in 4 articles in 1995 and 1996, after all the photos were completed. As I said, mostly taken in 1993 and 1994. So the titles of the 4 articles were Judenrein, Traces of the Past, Survivors, and the Reproachful Voices of the Dead. In them, Freedman deliberately ordered and juxtaposed specific images to convey her opinions and viewpoints. The cover of the issue with her first article, Judenrein, featured a photograph of bride, groom, and wedding guests outside Prague's old new synagogue, the Altneuschule. And here it is, the photo taken in 1994 on the cover. So in a sense, the wedding photograph is an ironic contradiction of the title, Judenrein, which is a term the Nazis used to describe towns and cities that were cleansed of Jews during the final solution. So the wedding signifies, right, that Jews are present, alive, marrying, and creating new families despite their near annihilation. Here's just the same image just by itself. You can see it a little better. Jill planned to use the same photo in her book, where she juxtaposed it with a view of tourists visiting the very crowded old Jewish cemetery in Prague, seen on the left. In the photo on the left, you see how just the cemetery is like full right? It's supposed to be, a place of reflection, of mourning, a place of quiet, and it's kind of overrun with tourists. It's also a place of death, and on the right, the place of life, the wedding. So she's very intentional about these juxtapositions. Among the other images included in the essay, as well as in the book mock-up, are several focusing on the communal revitalization efforts of the then chief rabbi of Prague, Karol Sidon, and his wife, Ruth. So in the image here, Ruth's showing her stepson, Danny, the custom of shoveling dirt into a grave during a burial. And we'll see it in another juxtaposition. The picture on the right is three Polish students, part of a group called Action Zunajzyken, who are helping clean up a Jewish cemetery in Prague. So this was a juxtaposition that she made in the book mock-up, showing non-Jewish teenagers volunteering to clean up the Jewish cemetery in Prague through an organization called the Action Reconciliation Service for Peace, founded by the Evangelical Church in Germany. After speaking with the students, Jill wrote a text that expressed her doubt that the organization's mission was having a real impact on the young people's understanding of the past or their attitudes towards Jews. And it's really just looking at the juxtaposition of the photographs sort of highlights the different experiences, right, of maybe this same generation of young people in Europe. But what's their experience of being a Jew, of understanding who the Jews were who are no longer here in two different contexts. And then in a different juxtaposition, in one of her articles in the APF Reporter, you see on the lower right on your screen the photograph of the students, but now it's juxtaposed with a cemetery photo. So this grouping of photos in the second number of the journal, which she called Traces of the Past, juxtaposed the photo of the students with the Prague Jewish Cemetery, here with no people, right? No tourists in the cemetery. And it's communicating a different and poignant message with this pairing. She notes in her caption, which I will just tell you because it's hard to read here. She notes in her caption the chilling observation that after 1939, it was the only place Jewish children were allowed to play. And now those children are, completely absent. There's no children here at all. Traces of the Past, this article began with a brief text on the history of Jews in Prague from the early 10th century, focusing on their confinement to a walled ghetto and the fires, plagues, and pogroms that decimated the community. And it was accompanied by 13 photographs. The article concluded the Nazis were not the first to steal and slaughter, but they were the most thorough, and now there's little left to steal or murder. We got a hint, before of the lengthy photo captions that she provided for her photos. So they tell stories of the haunting, often uncanny intrusion of the past into everyday life. In Traces of the Past, Freedman juxtaposes images that depict everyday life, yet are disturbing both visually and by what she reveals in her text. For example, as seen here, she placed a photograph of the crematorium at the former Terezin camp in the Czech Republic. That's on the left, right? It's placed in close proximity to another image of two teenagers from the town making out on a bench by a river. Her captions state that a sign at the site recounts the location's history and that ashes from the ovens were thrown into this river. So it becomes very chilling and very, very unsettling. The article also includes 3 photographs from Prague, those on the left, and I'll show you them closer in a moment. That draw attention to the moral fissure that erupts when Jewish suffering is enmeshed with tourism. In the caption for her photograph of a restaurant in Prague that I'm showing you here, with a cigarette advertisement on its outdoor tables, you see that camel, right? On the outdoor table umbrellas, and the incorporation of a Star of David and silhouette of a synagogue in its signage reading snack bar. I can that laser pointer on right, you see here the synagogue, the Star of David, and then it says snack bar. Freedman doesn't shy away from pointing out that the restaurant, she says, the restaurant has nothing to do with the Jewish community. She finds it all offensive, and it's just so, and she sees it an exploitation of not only Jews, but of Jewish memory, exploiting the Jewish past of the area for commercial purposes. And this is tourists peering through the doors of the Old New Synagogue, also from 1994. In her writings, Jill frequently expressed her concern for the ways in which many formerly Jewish areas, as well as the camps themselves, had become tourist destinations. And she criticized their voyeuristic appeal as communicated in this photograph of the tourists here. Literally voyeurs. We're back to the Missing Generations book mock-up again. But also in the text of the next article in the APF Reporter, which used these same images. It was called Survivors, and it included 3 photographs and an extended story about Roman Ferber, who you see here, about his return visit to Auschwitz-Birkenau for the first time in 50 years. So as I said, this story that appeared published in the APF Reporter, she was also going to include the same story as part of her book. And here you see it in the book mock-up. Here is another photo that appeared in both the book mock-up and the article. And here you see Ferber, who passed away in 2016, climbing onto a shelf at the barracks at Birkenau, where 10 or more inmates slept. Ferber was born in Krakow, and he is remembered as one of the youngest Schindler Jews. Despite being protected for a time, he was deported to Auschwitz from Brennlitz at the age of 11 and was liberated in 1945. And here you see, this is the APF Reporter again. In the photo at the top, which I apologize, it's very dark here. You see Ferber, he's over here. He stands adjacent or sort of almost within the ruins of the crematoria at Birkenau. And then I'm going to show you again. Here's another picture of Ferber. After her encounter with Ferber, Jill wrote, "It was strange seeing him, his arm as identification in the records room at Auschwitz." So he came in because he wanted to know more about what records they had of him here. And the woman researcher there, asked him his name and his number, and he showed her his arm. And then I'm just showing you this same image again, because in the photo of, here's Ferber among the ruins, but I'm going to show you this photo is tourists at the site of the gas chamber. I think I have this photo. Yeah, that's the same photo, right? Bottom left-hand side. So the photo of Ferber returning to the place, right, where he was almost murdered, is juxtaposed with tourists who are visiting the gas chamber as tourists, right? A different experience, not forced to go into it, but going into it to see it as tourists. And that was another juxtaposition that she made, like very biting to me kind of juxtaposition. So and it's also because, in a way, if you don't know what this photograph is, there's something kind of banal about it. You look at the trees and the way the sunlight, hits different parts of the image differently. Maybe something almost pastoral about it, but then you realize what it is. So in the same, and again, this was part of this same essay in APF Reporter. So the meaning, it kind of registers slowly. And this is one of several photographs where the ways in which these sites of mass killing are used and visited today produce these uncanny feelings. Something, that seems familiar, possibly banal, becomes like increasingly terrifying. In the series of articles in the APF Reporter published in 1996 called The Reproachful Voices of the Dead, this article focuses on memorial sites and commemorations. And I'm just looking at what I had left given my time. I only want to go in for a few more minutes before we bring Wendy in. On the cover of the journal, it was this photo of a child tenderly touching the face of a sculpted child held in the lap of another figure, part of this very dense amalgam of figures comprising the Holocaust Memorial at Miami Beach, which was dedicated in 1990. So Freedman took this photograph while she was living in Florida, and she later said that she saw it as one of her best and favorite photos. And it's very intimate. This is a 42-foot high memorial. So instead of photographing its monumentality, photographing it from a distance, she focuses in and she captures the pathos, right, in this intimate encounter. She later wrote that the 1.5 million children who perished during the Holocaust are the missing generations. And she does this again in this photo to me at the Treblinka Memorial in this photograph here on the right. Treblinka is also it takes up a lot of space. It's a huge memorial of these jagged stones. But what she focuses in here is just the family, this intimacy, this closeness of this family experience, this moment of memory, of reflection that you see them really overcome with grief again. So it's these small emotional experiences that I think distinguish a lot of her work. And I just have a little bit more. And as we've also seen, while Freedman's photographs cannot document the actual crimes that took place, she nevertheless communicates the horrors visually through absence, suggestion, and the emotions of her subject, and directly in these extended captions that she has that are based on her interviews, her reading and processing and synthesizing of writings by historians like Martin Gilbert and Simon Wiesenthal, and poets like Don Pagish, Nellie Sachs, other writers, and survivors. This is, she also photographed some artifacts. This was, she saw a suitcase in one of the displays that had the name Freedman, although spelled differently from her, and that she wrote about her anguish in seeing her own family name on that suitcase, and this idea that if her grandfather hadn't emigrated to America, this could have been, she might have been among those children who perished. And a group of shoes with dying flowers at Majdanek in a display at Dynamic. But at Majdanek, this was also included in the APF Reporter essay, as was this photo taken in Boca Raton of survivor and artist Chaim Goldberg, because she went to many of the gatherings of survivors and she sought them out. And this is the last image that I'm going to show you. So I'm just going to conclude here with a few paragraphs. So as we've seen, Jill did include a few images of survivors in the United States in the book project. And this joyous image of resilience depicts a group of women also in Boca Raton at a 50th anniversary year commemoration. She said, she wrote about this image, members of South Florida Holocaust survivors dance for joy. There's great warmth and love at these survivor gatherings, and when they drink and dance to L'Chaim, to life, they mean it. Most go to the schools and tell their stories to the children so that they will learn and hopefully never stand by passively again. This is their duty and their passion, to bear witness, to never forget, never again. With these images, Freedman brings the history of the Shoah and its aftermath to the attention of another generation. Each image asks us to remember and to act. When I've written or spoken about Jill's project, I feel the tension between ending on a note of hope or of despair. Perhaps Jill occupied such a space as well. She has left us with the images of the survivors dancing with joy and the hope embodied in the image of a child encountering the Miami Monument. But as I have written elsewhere, even so, Freedman concludes Missing Generations, her book mock-up, with Borowski's pessimistic observations from his short story, The January Offensive. And his words read in part, and I just have an extended quote. and then a little bit more. In this war, morality, national solidarity, patriotism, and the ideals of freedom, justice, and human dignity had all slid off man like a rotten rag. There is no crime that a man will not commit in order to save himself. Our difficult, patient concentration camp existence had taught us that the whole world is really the concentration camp. The weak work for the strong, and if they have no strength or will to work, then let them steal or let them die. The world is ruled by neither justice nor morality. Crime is not punished nor virtue rewarded. One is forgotten as quickly as the other. The world is ruled by power, and power is obtained with memory. So that was a quote. Borowski's words no doubt resonated with Freedman because they echo her own beliefs, the beliefs that led her to join the Poor People's Campaign in 1968, and her reasons for taking pictures at all, including her opposition to the Vietnam War. Like most of her projects, Missing Generations is a manifestation of Freedman's relentless pursuit of social justice in an inherently unjust world. So I will leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Susan. Let's see how we all get on here now. Okay, let me find the right. Okay, here we go. Wendy, you have to unmute yourself and put your video on, please. Wendy? Okay, there she is.
Yes, you have to, I think you have to put me on. You hit me.
Oh, I asked you to unmute, so that's what happened. Yeah.
So
Exactly.
you have to, all right.
Okay.
You're on.
I'm on. All right.
Okay, thank you so much.
And can you see me too?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, beautiful. Great.
Thank you so much, Susan. This was a very impressive and presentation of very intense and haunting photographs. Thank you so much. I now have the pleasure to introduce Wendy Wernick, who's Lean Six Sigma Black Belt Healthcare certified. She completed a bachelor's in health service administration and is a registered wound ostomy continence nurse working clinical solution specialist for Northeast at Convatec. Wendy Wernick is also a distant relative of Jill Freedman and is, with her sisters Susan Hecht and Nancy Sklar, the custodian of the Jill Freedman family estate. Welcome, Wendy. And I want to start with a question right away. So you, if I understand right, you are Jill Freedman's first cousin once removed. And I would like to ask you, how was it growing up with a relative like Jill Freedman? Can you tell us an event that sticks to your mind?
Yes, I could tell you lots of them, but she was our adventurous cousin. She was eclectic. She was beautiful. She was timeless, and she related to all of us. And the best is coming to my sister's bar mitzvah with a taxi driver who ended up being the guest. So, and that was just her. We would go and meet her in the city, and it was exciting. And, she didn't have children, and we knew that she traveled all over. And by the way, going back to my bio, you could see it's very relevant to the arts. So I'm going to explain to you how we all fell into this, I think, and what our mission is a little bit, and just connecting the Holocaust to who Jill is and what we're trying to do. And the biggest thing is when Jill was ill, her very good friend, Rita Maloney, was the executor and helping her. And she had to deal with her family at that time. And she really felt with Jill being ill that she needed to be around family. So what she did is she heard about Cookie. That's my mom's name. And they were very bonded together. So she reached out to her. And my mom was 88 years old at that time. And she also had some physical elements, but they were just so bonded. And my mother, of course, was going to run out there. So my two sisters, there's Nancy Spar and Susan Hecht, we said we'd all chip in. So we helped her with the last year of life. And we had no idea what we were going to uncover. And when she was dying, she kept on saying at the end, oh, it's family, it's family, it's family, and we have a family business. And we're thinking that's great, but we knew if she was alive, we probably would not be talking because this was her life and this was who Jill was. But we do feel the responsibility to make sure we are carrying out this legacy. So I'll go more into that. And so the whole thing is really is that at the time we knew she was famous. We knew she was eccentric. We knew that she was the cousin who had one camera in her hand and a dream in another. And we saw that she was on the New York Times. We knew we went to her exhibits, but we had no idea. We just didn't even realize how, until exploring these archives, did we really truly uncover the depth and breadth of her legacy and how well known and respected she is in the art and photography world. It just, every time we have an archivist who comes to the house, we're learning something new because we're all neophytes with this. We had no idea and we don't claim to. And thank you, Susan and Dr. Chevlowe, you have done a magnificent job. And when Dr. Chevlowe came, when Susan came to look at the archives before COVID, we were looking through it and we didn't even realize how much or how this Holocaust was so really the spine of her future and her taking these photos. And something we also didn't realize is that every phase of her art, like she's a genius and everything she does is intentional. It's not only just capturing the pictures, it's editing it, it's the printing, the manipulating of the lights. So she's having you look at these photos the way she wants to portray the message that she's trying to get on. And she's very funny, was very almost like dichotomies. She would pick out these canny things and use light to portray it. And again, we're learning this not from ourselves, other people who have studied art. People have been wonderful sharing this, such as Hank Gantz, also with Mary Engel, who is Ruth Orkin's daughter. Stephen Bulger has been wonderful. Cheryl Dunn they all knew Jill and were telling us more about her and what she did and how the genius of her. And she also was as Sue will tell you, also a prolific writer. We're finding journals of things that she wrote. We so wish she was alive now. We would have asked. There's so much we feel we didn't even get to explore with her. And when she was dying, she also related to my kids, the other generation. She was timeless. And it was amazing because she was able to connect to every generation, and her photos are timeless and her photos are so relevant to what's going on now. And that's sort of which I really believe that her journey started when she was 9 years old and she saw those images. And what's sort of ironic and serendipitous, I really believe, is the photos that she saw in Time magazine and the Holocaust, they were embedded in her head. And then she met a guy on a donkey smoking a doobie, I'm sure, which is a joint. And she was in the park and she quit her job, took her camera and went down to capture the photos of the Poor People's Campaign in 1968. Those photos were printed in Time magazine. Again, that's what launched her career. And us finding this all out and realizing we have this manuscript and these photos that Susan had already curated and what's going on with anti-Semitism in the world and what she had made a point to say in that manuscript, never again, what can I do to help? It was almost like she was talking to us. I'm getting the chills. I'm not that woo-woo, but it just was, this is the perfect time for us to launch these serious photos to tell this story and how she did it, how she's told it. And as I mentioned, she was eclectic and she was a New York City photographer mainly. And her pictures are raw. They capture the city. People still they're authentic and people still relate to them now. And so we're going to be doing a whole retrospective work of her also. So again, Susan had helped us look through those archives. When anyone else comes and looks through those archives, we see that. We also see that Jill had a deep love for animals, so part of our portion of what we make goes towards animals. And before we had this, she already was showcased. I don't know, a lot of you know, in a Center of Photography, ICP, Smithsonian, she's in Carnegie Museum. Internationally, she's in Stockholm and so forth. And then after COVID, because that's when we received this whole archives, it was very important that we keep it together. Our mission was so that everyone could see her photos. We've done some exhibits in Paris, Ireland, where she was, they've been on street photographers, and there was a whole room that was just for her, because she's done books on Ireland, firemen, and again, she embedded herself in these situations. And besides that, also, we do want to reproduce this book. Well, not reproduce, we want to actually produce this manuscript with the funds that we do get. And we're hoping that we do, and not hoping, we do that we're talking talks already. 2 months ago, we started promoting the Holocaust, and we're in hopes that we'll have a traveling piece with this Holocaust museum. We can use what Dr. Chevlowe used for the Derfner Museum, as long as they get credit for that. And they can also use their own pieces to tell the story of how Jill saw the Holocaust and how people are cavalier now. And it just, there's a lot that you could see that you can do with that. Again, our mission is clear. We are doing the right thing. People have been wonderful, and we're so grateful to be here at this really monumental day. I think this would mean a lot to Jill, because she really wanted to make a difference. And it's all, again, just sort of organically going from one step to the next.
Yeah.
And thank you again. I hope that wasn't too much.
Thank you, Wendy. No, that was amazing. And I ask everyone in the audience, please post your questions, because this is the moment to do so. And I have a question for Susan. Susan, how did you get involved into the project? How did you meet, and how was your own process discovering Jill's work?
Yeah, it was so interesting. So I was actually working, I had met, I'm trying to think how I met them, but I met the widow of another photographer, Leonard Freed, was another documentary photographer, and Hank Gans, who Wendy mentioned, who was a friend of Jill's, also knew Leonard Freed and his wife. And so his widow, Leonard's widow, Brigitte, introduced me to Hank Gans, who introduced me to Wendy's sister, Nancy, and invited me out to see the archive, which I can just say was based at Cookie's house before she passed away, which is just within a year. I believe Cookie passed away, Jill's cousin, just within the year. So I had the privilege of meeting her as well, and coming to see, I think Jill had herself organized things. Yeah, there were portfolio boxes, and they were all labeled of her different projects and series of works. And I think at the time I was looking, because, you know, we're the Derfner Judaica Museum, so I was looking for something, the Jewish work in particular. I think they pointed me in the direction of the Holocaust work and maybe some work done in Israel. And as we're going through things like within the portfolio boxes, I don't know, they already knew, I think you already knew about this mock-up of the book, but there was the foundation application. And so the whole historical context, it wasn't just the photos themselves, but the context in which she did this work, and the different contexts in which the photos had, you know, just had been published. You know, I just started to see that. And so it was very, very interesting. I curated, well, I was actually the assistant curator at the time for a big show at the Jewish Museum which strangely enough was in 1994, which was at the time that Jill was working on this. There was a show that James Young curated for the Jewish Museum called The Art of Memory, Holocaust Memorials in History. And other things that, I've done, I also taught at JTS, Holocaust and Visual Culture. So obviously, and, I'd done the Leonard Fried show. So it was an area that I already had a very strong interest in, the representation of, memory and reflection and history of the Holocaust through the work of documentary and art photographers. So I thought that could be, the focus of it, doing an exhibition here would be about how she planned this book. And I think it's great that the family now is looking to publish, what was left unpublished at the time of her death. And, it's interesting because she must have worked on the book mock-up close to the time that she took the photos. And there's sort of, it may pop up, but it doesn't seem to be evidence of whether she did try to publish it, right?
I don't No, I didn't see
Yeah.
anything. And that's why I feel like this is the time to do it. I think maybe the opportunity was there. I believe that's when she got sick. So she got a little
Yes,
sidetracked
right.
with that. That's what pulled her away from it. Because she was so passionate about whatever she did. And that had it. But Susan, you really uncovered, again, as I told you, this was the spine to why it makes sense. And we never knew that. What made her, why she wanted to make a difference in what she did to the core who she was. And family and being Jewish was so important. And she didn't care whatever underdog you were, she had such a respect for that. And also, we might add, she was not the easiest person to work with.
Mhm.
And people will tell you we've heard some really good stories, and we honor her. She would want us to tell the truth. Truth, as my children said to me, was so important to her, and she lived how she wanted to live her life.
Yeah, and I think, I find it fascinating how deep this really early childhood, not earliest, but as a 9-year-old being exposed to these Holocaust images, how much it determined her life and her interests and her passions, and how much it affected her emotionally. I found that really, really it makes a lot of sense, and it makes us look at our childhood experiences maybe in a little bit of a different way. But also, Susan, you had spoken when we spoke yesterday about photo books, and how much of a strongly curated artwork they really were and are, and combined with her writing, and also discovering Jill's strength as a writer. Do you want to talk more about that?
For photographers, like even today, but I when we were talking yesterday, I gave the example of, Robert Frank's The Americans, in terms of, that's artists, or photographers, photojournalists, express themselves, and also by having complete control of the product, when they're working as on consignment or on assignment, or they may be working commissioned to do things, or do things as a job, right? And sell their photos to magazines and such like that. But with the photo book, it's really, you have maybe controlling the writing, as well as, the layout of the pictures, and being able to tell a story through these very carefully arranged, photographs that narrate a particular story. And for her, you can see right away, I think, how the meaning of those juxtapositions, and how poignant they could be, or biting, or because she was known to not be afraid to say what she meant.
Mhm.
She was a very direct speaker. She did a talk not long before her death too at the School of Visual Arts, which if you Google her name, School of Visual Arts talk, you can see her talking about her own work in a slide presentation, and it's really fascinating. She's very, very direct. So I can, if that answered the question,
Yeah.
Rachel, there's also
Yeah.
a question in the chat. I'd be happy to address a question from Marcia in the chat, and I can just, because I don't think the other participants can see it, so I'm happy to read that. It says, during your talk, you kept referring to contemporary visitors to Prague as tourists, but for me, I prefer the word witnesses. It's a more sensitive appreciation of people who visit Holocaust memorial sites. They come to these sites to connect with our fellow innocent Jews who were so terribly treated by the Nazis. I visited a number of concentration camps, including Theresienstadt, and never thought of myself as a tourist, but rather a witness. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you. Thank you for the comment. I totally appreciate it. You know, Jill also thought of herself like as a pilgrim going to these sites. You know, going there as a place to mourn and commemorate and honor memory. I also traveled, you know, to Auschwitz and to Theresienstadt, and you know, even going to Schindler's Factory, going to places in Prague and Krakow where Jewish life was thriving. Where all of these things happened, and it's true. And what I was just meaning was sort of to point out like the tension between that and the possibility of these, that some people feel these sites may be exploited, or it's uncomfortable or uncanny because it is going to a sacred space, but it can often be crowded with tourists and their cameras are on their neck, and are people respecting the places? You know, we've had this, as Rachel, I'm sure you know, as at the memorial in Berlin. You know, people you know, talk about like people going there, like, I don't know, to hide and make out among the pillars and different different things happening. And so, you know, when you go to these sites, sometimes you go and it's all these tourist buses, or people are being brought there, or kids are being brought there. Do they really understand what happened? And again, that example of that little cafe with the umbrellas, but then using Jewish symbols kind of to attract people there. So I think that there's just this idea that these are places that are solemn and should be respected, and they, you know, and you're absolutely right. Many people go there. You know, they are paying the respects they mean to, and they'll learn a lot. They may first come to this place as like, why are they dragging me here? You know, like I'm in high school, and you know, and why are they dragging me here? What am I supposed to learn?
Yeah.
We can even see that with our own museums in the U.S., right? With the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum or Museum of Jewish Heritage, which bring thousands and thousands of students through, and maybe they don't always know why they're first coming, but they learn a lot. So thank you for that observation.
Yeah.
And I also think, if you would comment, I think what Jill was trying to say, and this is not from I guess, an educated view as much as someone going to visit there, Jill sometimes would trying to make a point. So there might have been those one or two or a few people who, like the couple making out, she wants to say, like, it should have been, she wants to make sure it never happens again. Maybe this is a way of doing it. So she was just saying, why are they so cavalier? And again, she's going to point that out. She's going to highlight that. But as Susan had said, and the person who had said that, you're right. It is not everyone. It is a witness that we are seeing it, but some people are just doing it as it's not so black and white with that. But
Yeah.
sometimes the guides are not really understanding it. Maybe there should be better training. I know when I went, the guide was very aloof and also cavalier. But again, I'm talking about it not as an educated archivist or Holocaust in that much education. I have not studied it like you both have.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, these places have become the tourist dimension is very strong, but I like the comment here that where our Canadian listener says, I agree, many visitors do arrive at Holocaust sites as tourists, fortunately, some of them leave as witnesses, which I think is a beautiful, way to see it. And, you try to, you just hope that people get touched, even though the presentation or the experience, having a tour through these sites has changed over the years and not to the better. So, yeah. So Ellen is asking, she seems to prefer the black and white medium in all these photographs. Was it always her choice when dealing with hard subject matters?
Absolutely. She used, and I know Susan could probably answer that too, but black and white was her way. And again, she was self-taught, and that she knew how to use that lighting, the white and black. She felt it was most profound, and it was a way that she can show those oppositions or to make that point across, which was what, and one of the things about her, she also wanted you to think. She wanted you, it just created, again, it was a mastery of light, which she did with that. And her thing was she wanted you to question things, and because she wanted to reveal the real truth and get you going, get your juices going.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And Susan, do you agree that that was her black and white? I don't know if you knew why she.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know her specific answer, but I know with a lot of documentary photographers, there's an authenticity around using black and white, that it's about history, that it's about documentation, that it's authentic. So you really do see most documentary photographers using black and white.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, beautiful, wonderful. So I'm afraid our time is up already. One quick question. Are there any of her books still on the market? So
yes. So we are going to, you can get them. There has Santana, you can get books. You can also go to her website. Or you can go to her Instagram, the Jill Freedman State, and I should know that because I sometimes write it. And you'll be hearing more because we're going to republish her Ireland books. And there's the Santana books. We can get the police books, Street Cops, and you'll be hearing more. We'll send out more about her books. And I just see here. And dogs. There's a dog book also. We'll be doing some exhibits coming up also in August. And also we have some, we're actually settling on the dates right now. So unfortunately, we don't have everything set in black and white right now, literally.
Yeah. But we will publish the links to the website so everyone can follow, and we can also, once there's an exhibition decided, then we will also publish that. So
yeah, because there is something on August 23rd in Cromer Valley. There'll be something. There'll be something in Canada, in Toronto. We're looking at something, a retrospective. There's also, if you could look at, there's Cheryl Dunn 2013 document Everybody's Streets. Let's see, Rita Maloney did also produce the film New York Photographers that won Jill Freedman in the City. That's won some awards. And Behind the Lens. And Jill Freedman Estate. You can go on, you can ask them questions there, and we'll have more for you. It's all coming.
Yeah, that is wonderful news. Thank you so much, Susan and Wendy, for introducing Jill Freedman and her work to us. And I just want to quote Jill. She wrote in the introduction to her book about the Holocaust, and I quote, "Never forget," I vowed. "The Holocaust was the story of humanity at its most depraved and craven. Nothing would ever be the same." And a little further down in her introduction, she writes, "I'm chasing ghosts, missing generations that have haunted me these 50 years and left a hole in my heart. My work commemorates the 6 million, and it celebrates the dignity, the strength, the courage, and humanity of those who against all odds survive. Am Israel Chai, the Jewish people lives. So
Beautiful. Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Rachel, for this opportunity, and Susan.
Take
thank
care,
you very
everybody.
much. Everybody be well. Thank you.